What's up, YouTube? I am live, and I haven't gone live on YouTube in quite some time. Then the last time we went live, there were two of us, which is fine. That is neither here nor there. I want to talk about the Rings of Power, and I'm sure people might jump in at some point later in time, which is totally fine. I just watched the third episode about an hour ago, and I watched the first two episodes last weekend when it premiered, but I was out of town for about 5 days and I didn't get to record anything for a couple other shows that I'm covering on here. And honestly, it allowed me time to think about what this show was trying to do. And was allowing me to think back about the writings that both J.R.R. and Christopher Tolkien had created. And I think one of the interesting things that is coming up a lot is the comparison between this show and what Peter Jackson did and Fran Walsh and the whole crew. Um, Now, I think in terms of like what what they did at that time, so going back 20 years, right? Going back 20 years when the first movie came out, when Two Towers and The Return of the King came out, a lot of people were obviously very much um, very much in love with everything, including myself. And the books were well known, and obviously they grew in popularity. It's obviously true, and there's plenty of proof that Peter Jackson didn't follow the movie or movies, or his movies didn't follow the books to a T. There's obviously parts that are much different, and there are parts that he didn't really include. And the funny thing is, I've seen people here on YouTube make comparisons to his movies when the parts that they're showing from the movie weren't even the books either. So it's like an inaccurate statement. It's like an oxymoron. You're canceling yourself out. And I don't know how many people have actually read the Lord of the Rings trilogy. I don't know how many people have actually read The Hobbit. If you're a true Lord of the Rings fan, if you're a true Hobbit fan, if you're a true Tolkien fan, rather, you've read all that. But if you're a true Tolkien fan, you've read more. You've you've read the Unfinished Tales, you've read the Silmarillion, you've read the additional works that Christopher Tolkien had put out after. Um, he had gathered a lot of information from his father, and I think the interesting thing here is even when those movies came out, Christopher Tolkien was pretty. He voiced his opinion rather well, and obviously he didn't like certain things with those movies, and I understand why he did it. And I think there's a clip that's going around of Peter Jackson in an old interview of where he says the message that they're trying to convey isn't their own, but rather what or rather what Tolkien is trying to convey through his writings. And through these three episodes, I just don't know if that same thing is translating well. Next week will be halfway through the first season of a 5-season series. And I think for Amazon, they can definitely look at the end of this season. And I don't know how far along they are. I don't know if they've finished filming every season or what. But I think at the very least, they could take some hints from the feedback, and I don't like how I've already seen censorship I've already seen the naysayers, and my question to the people out there who are the naysayers, when I tell people I don't like this, when I say this is just bad fan fiction to me, this is not very enticing for me to watch because they're literally chalking the freaking storyline is being so compressed. It is being so diluted. I'm just flabbergasted with some of these choices. Like, there's plenty of characters that they actually had and they actually bought the rights to, but yet they decide to ruin the entire character of Galadriel. Galadriel is 6'4". She's beautiful. She has blonde hair. She has gray eyes. She is powerful as all heck. She was so powerful that Saruman and Elrond couldn't really fathom or understand how powerful she was. And you kind of get a glimpse of that in the Fellowship of the Ring, right? And right in front of Frodo's eyes when she gets tempted with the One Ring and beats it. She beats the temptation. Beating temptation is such an important thing. It is such a big theme that we all face in our very lives, and that is completely overlooked. Um, and I think the other interesting parts of what they're doing with this Galadriel is making your commander. She never picked up a damn sword once in the entirety of Tolkien's writings. She didn't need to. She didn't need to pick up a sword. She's the freaking commander fighting Sauron? No, she never fought at all. Her brother, she didn't get her brother's body back. Her brother died fighting Sauron. Freaking fed to the damn wolves. Again, the inaccuracies here, like they're trying to tell their own story, right? And it's like my point to the people out there, like, oh no, you're just a book lover. Yeah, exactly. The movies that Peter Jackson made, this show would not exist if it wasn't for Tolkien himself and Tolkien actually writing the damn words on the pages. If you can't honor that, if you can't fathom that in your head, if you can't get that, you can't comprehend it, then I don't know what to tell you. It's very simple. You pay honor by doing the source material as accurately as possible, because a lot of people out there don't know about anything that comes before the Hobbit, right? We know the stories, we kind of hear some things alluding to it, but aside from that, we don't get a lot. No, a lot of people didn't even know there was an original Dark Lord. What? Yes. Melkor was the original Dark Lord. He's essentially Lucifer, Satan himself. And the interesting thing as well, because the timeline is so compressed, it's so all over the place. Like, we're getting Lindon, which was originally part of Obsidian, and obviously they can't really talk about the actual part of Middle Earth. This is a spoiler out there, and if you don't give a shit, then by all means keep listening. But um, that part is the eastern part of the land that was broken off and sunken essentially into the ocean because the war of the Valar and Morgoth, it sunk. Beleriand sunk. It was part of Middle Earth. It sunk into the damn ocean because of just the tragicness of this war, right? But going like the fact that we're already on Numenor in this third episode, and that like Elendil is already here, like the time, like the years just don't make sense. And again, you're throwing characters together that would never actually they never cross paths with one another, and that was intentional. Like Tolkien intentionally wrote it that way. He wanted characters to be spaced out because of the emphasis on the longevity of the second age. I feel like this writing isn't really, it's not contributing, it's not paying the homage to Tolkien's writings. Like, you know, I'm gonna talk about spoilers here because I don't even know if this is really going to follow suit in within this show or not. But you've got you've got the rings of power that haven't been created yet. We haven't seen Sauron yet. Numenor. I I at some point Sauron's going to be on Numenor. He's gonna um corrupt one of the king's men. This queen, queen in Numenor. No, I'm sorry. Um, Al Farazan was one of the rulers in Numenor who was corrupted by Sauron, and Sauron basically convinced him to take troops, amass Numenorians, and attack Valinor. So you've got one of the kings that's ruling Numenor with Sauron himself trying to attack Valinor, and then Iluvatar is like, "What are you all trying to do here?" Defeats them. Sauron dies in his body incarnate, and then sinks all of Numenor. Here's the catch: Elendil was part of the faithful, part of the Numenorians that knew something was happening. They knew and they got word that they needed to leave because of the bad corruption, right? From Sauron on the island. So they flee and they arrive to what's now of left of Middle Earth, and they form the two realms of exile. You've got Anor, and then you've got Gondor, and that's when Isildur rules Arnor, and then you've got uh, his sons Isildur and uh, oh god, I can't think of his son's other name, and they just mentioned it too. Adonir, right? Um, Shame on me for not remembering, but anyway, there's interesting things about where they rule in Gondor, and because uh, they ruled on opposite sides. So again, it's interesting how um it's interesting how you've got the orcs that are seemingly creating Mordor, right? For Sauron. And yet we haven't seen him yet. Um Now it's it's kind of intriguing to see Elendil already here. You know, um I don't know, right, where the show is going to really leave off. I think he never had a daughter either. So like again, there's been quite a few characters that have been created and added into the show, and I just don't know how I feel about them yet. Through 3 episodes, I just don't know. Um, I really haven't been able to find like key attachments yet. I really haven't been able to like say allow myself to feel anything for them. Um, I think thus far, maybe Arondir, uh, the elf that got captured and is still alive in the trenches with the orcs. He seems, his story is very much created to resemble Eragon and Arwen, right? You've got an elf and a man, trying to engage in romance, and um, so sure, that's what they want to create and throw in there again. That's fine. Obviously, I'm not going to completely batch on this show. I think the visual effects are wonderful. They're top tier. They are very spectacular and a sight to behold. I definitely think the technology has risen to a great level, and the cinematography has been, pretty great. I don't think there's really anything wrong with the directing sense of things, but I I'd also like to gather more of maybe what can be done in the future seasons. They're all going to look this well, and that's a lot of where the budget went to. Um, Acting wise, I guess it's been okay. I never want to really harp on the actors because they're just doing their job, right? They are doing the job of acting, being something someone else, and trying to convey their roles, and again doing their job, but they're doing their job that's written for them. So the showrunners, the writers are giving them the script, and then they're following with how it's written. And again, I think some of the acting with some of the characters are just it's just the inaccuracies that's really not doing it for me. Like E- Ellendale in the books, he was nicknamed Ellendale the Tall. He's like 7'11". Dude's a giant. I was like, will they make him appear this way in the show? Kind of like how they made Gandalf and all the other characters appear much larger than all the hobbits. And by the way, those movies had far less of a budget than the show does, and they were able to pull it off. So this show can't convey the height comparison. Why not? It seems like it's a bit of laziness. So again, you're not following the story that was written about these key characters. You're not really contributing to the characters that you're including in the show. You're not making Galadriel Lady of the Light. You're putting a sword in her hand and you're throwing her in the trenches and making her hunt down Sauron for some sort of vengeance. I am vengeance. Okay, Batman. Then you got Elendil, who yells at his daughter. That's not even real or canon. Kind of seems like a dick, even though he was not a dick at all in the lore. So, you know, that's an interesting twist, I guess. Um, I think um, the Harfoots, uh, just not really digging them. They just didn't really explain anything. Like when you watch the beginning of Fellowship of the Ring, and you you see the introduction to hobbits, it's so well done. Why? Well, I think obviously the script was well written, the directing was good, and they followed the story. I get it. I get it. This is in the second age. There's not a whole lot compared to like what the Hobbit is in the Lord of the Rings, and you're just going off appendices and other works, and the encyclopedia for Tolkien's world, and Arda, and you're creating things from there. I get it, but at the same time, maybe just I don't know, follow what they did with the Hobbit a little bit better, a little bit closer. I think there's a lot that still could be done. And again, I'm not going to completely disregard some of their approaches, um, even though I do think that the Harfoots need to, I don't know, like to me they just don't have that quite same feel to the way the hobbits do. Um, and this stranger, uh, who I see people already saying things like it's Gandalf, and I'm like, no, no. It can't be Gandalf, and I'll tell you why. Gandalf wasn't put on Middle Earth until the Third Age, and there's a reason for it. It's because him being part of the Maiar, he wasn't the first one. Saruman was the first one. And in fact, Gandalf, who has a different name as part of the Maiar, he was supposed to be the third. He was afraid that he was not going to be able to stop Sauron. He was actually terrified. He had fear from facing him. And that's exactly why he was put there. He was put there to conquer his fear. He was put there right after Saruman, and I believe it was Radagast that was supposed to be second, or it might have been one of the Blue Wizards. I forget, but um, I guess it's sort of besides the point. But he was put there at second to do that, to face his fears, to be there, to be, as we see how Gandalf has been a guide, a protector of Middle Earth, a protector of the light, a protector um, of all creatures, elf, men, hobbits, dwarves, you know, to be to be a friend, I guess, you know, to be a wizard, and for him, if this stranger is supposed to be Gandalf, it just I think it ruins the continuity. It definitely disregards Gandalf as a character. And I know they haven't said his name yet, but even if they go by his Maiar name as Olorin, dude, like I don't know, why they would do something like that. Like, there's really no point of them actually having or trying to do that either. So, and that's just the thing. Like, there's plenty more that they could have done, and no one was really forcing them to to compress it this 5 seasons. I would almost rather have them. uh I know these showrunners said in that Vanity Fair, or was a Variety magazine interview, how they all they wanted to do was just, they didn't want to make this a documentary. Well, don't write it like a documentary. You could still write a story and just have things spaced out. Right at the beginning of the second age, or yeah, right, the first season as the beginning of the second age. You know, talk about post first age results, how Morgoth was defeated and how Sauron has taken over. The characters that are still alive at that point, where things in Middle Earth are. And I think at that point you have more focus on some of the elves that are alive, and what they're doing. And I think time skips are also appropriate. Again, you're talking 3,400 years in the second age, and at that point, all you really need to do is determine when the time skips would come. Sure, you could have, um, you know, you could have Numenor be in every single season too, and then you could. Honestly, what would have been really cool to see is the evolution of the island of Numenor, like where we see when it's first gifted to men from the elves, and talking about more of that lineage, which I think should have been discussed, and it wasn't, because people are like, who is this and how are they related, how and where does this lineage come from? Because if you were to talk about it outside of the show, it can get confusing. But if you make it a little bit, if you simplify it and you convey it in the show, then I think people would have probably been able to grasp and understand things a little bit more, um, and how things would match up at that point. Now, thinking how Numenor would have this evolution over 5 seasons, because what happens in the book and the lore, and granted, even though the Numenor itself is a very small chapter in the Silmarillion, um, but I think showing how as the centuries progressed, you began to see more of how the men started to shape the city differently, how the men started to make things their own, and this is their place. And they had to honor the agreement that they would never sail towards Valinor, right? And that's when, obviously that promise, or that rule was broken when Sauron convinced Alpharazon's mind and people to go and try to take over Valinor, which was stupid. Yeah, but that's what happens when you're manipulated, right? So I think towards the end, like the last season, would have been when I think Numenor could have fallen, and that may still happen. We don't know, but if they're smart, they would do it like that. 'Cause that's how I would do it as an actual fan, as a hardcore fan. Um, it's and I think people just don't understand maybe where where I'm coming from, and where other fans that are as hardcore of a Tolkien fan as I am. It's um, some people might say, well, ignorance is bliss, and I'm like, I disagree, because if you understand how beautiful Tolkien's writings really are, and I know a lot of people was like, "Oh, I've read the Hobbit, I've read Lord of the Rings." That's great, and I appreciate that, but you could go further and read more, because reading is gaining knowledge, and knowledge is power. And knowledge is great when you actually can understand some of the pages and the things that Tolkien was writing. Um, and I don't know if it was something that Tolkien just maybe didn't really want to go too far in depth with the island of Numenor and the Numenorians, because we know that Aragorn's lineage was more so a coming from the, or labeled as the Dunedains. We hear that the Dunedain Ranger references in the trilogy. Um, but I don't know. Like I'm really curious to see where each season is going to go, and I don't know if we'll see Sauron at the end of this season. I think the dwarves were fairly well done. I mean, Khazad-dûm looked pretty cool. You got a city living on the inside, and got natural sunlight beaming through, and um, I imagine we'll probably see Durin's Bane at some point. We already saw the Balrog uh, in the trailer, in one of the trailers, right? I think it was the last one they showed. So we'll see that at some point, right? Because they dug too deep, as Gandalf told us, when he was reading the book in Fellowship of the Ring, before everyone thought he actually died, but just kidding. Um, and I think the interesting point too here is the relationship between Prince Durin and Elrond, and I don't know how I feel about it. Um, I guess it works, but it's not accurate. I do think the dwarfs are actually pretty cool, though. I think they were close, or closer to how the dwarves are in The Hobbit, and in, rather, I say Gimli, I guess. in in the Lord of the Rings. But yeah, I think there's a lot that can be done still. I don't know if this show is really salvageable to the fans like myself who know a lot, and I want people to understand where I'm coming from. I'm not hating on the actors. I'm not hating on anyone that helped really put this show together. My thing is they the compression of the story is what really bothers me. You know, I that was one of my fears going into this show, and I think there's a lot left to be desired from this show too. And I know like the ratings aren't very good, and I've seen things talking about review bombing, and I'm like, yeah, but there's also review boosting as well. There's plenty of people that could go on and do the same thing and go on to IMDb or go on to Rotten Tomatoes and just give it 5 stars, 10 stars and say, like, it was great. Well, extrapolate a little bit more. Why was it great? Why did you like it? Give me some details. Don't just give me just, thin air. I want you to tell me why you liked it or why you didn't like it. I'm telling you right now why I'm not really a fan of this show. I've been talking for 31 minutes now as to my gripes with this show. I'm not asking you to do what I'm doing. You could summarize it if you want, but writing it is a little bit easier than talking about it on like YouTube. But um, I think it's just easier to convey when you talk it out loud sometimes too. But um, I think the review bobbing is horse crap. Like that just means that anything can be review bombed. People can be review bombed. Shows, movies, but again, the reverse can happen as well. Um, and I think there are far more people on the internet that don't like what we've been seeing a trend now of IPs not following the source material close enough. And it's happened with Marvel, it's happened with DC, it's happened with Star Wars big time. It happened recently with Halo. There's one show it really hasn't happened with, and they've actually done a wonderful job, is Cobra Kai. And a lot of people aren't Karate Kid fans, but Karate Kid for 5 seasons now has been probably one of the best and most accurate shows, going back from an old IP and making it new and viewable for new viewers, new fans, old fans like myself. So it's definitely possible. You just need to write a good story. That's all. That's all it is. And uh, I'll throw this in here. I doubt I'll ever have a conversation with any of the showrunners face to face or even through a freaking audio format. But my question to the showrunners and the people who wrote the show would be, did you think of every possible scenario that wouldn't infringe on what Tolkien wrote? Because from what we've seen, it doesn't seem like he did. And I'm not saying that to be an asshole. I'm not saying that to be a dick. I'm saying that because it's like the saying goes, you know, did you think about whether or not you could, but did you think about whether or not you should? Should you go this route or think about it a little bit longer and really, 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 really dissect everything? And again, I know the comments about we didn't want to make this a documentary. You didn't have to. You just follow the storyline a little bit more accurately. Who cares if some of these characters aren't alive when other characters aren't? That's just how it is. That's what happens in real life as it stands. Imagine if someone were to do a documentary. Imagine if some alien race comes from another planet and was like, we have been observing the Earthlings for millennia, and we are going to compress 5,000 years into 5 seasons, right? How would you feel? if if anything from human civilization was compressed, these key figures from every part of the world were just so compressed. And granted, I know we don't have elves that live for thousands of years, but that's precisely my point. You want to talk about characters that you can stay attached to for over 5 seasons. Well, that's where the elves come in. And, much like how what happens with the characters in Lord of the Rings, like what essentially goes into the fourth age, like, Aragorn lives for a long ass time. But obviously, he dies first and then Arwen dies. Um, but Gimli and Legolas, they go back to Valinor. Gimli gets a pass, which is awesome, and uh, I think it's interesting how like we really haven't seen any like real friendships kind of come together through adversity just yet. Um, and uh, I think a lot of people so far with this story are um uh I don't know if they're just like too focused on like how it looks visually and not really thinking about the story. And or maybe people are. If you are, that's totally fine. But I'd like to hear what people's real thoughts are. Because I go online and I try to hear reviews and everything like that, and it's just there's no context, there's no meat and potatoes to it. Again, it's just I don't know. I thought it was good. That doesn't tell me anything. That's like me if I say I think it's bad, but don't you want to know why? Or do you care? I care. If you like this show, that's fine. I just can't stand it. Why am I still watching it? Because I love Tolkien and I want to see what they do to it. You know, that's essentially what 47 hours of my life for the next 5 years that I won't get back. But at the same time, things could change over the next 47 hours worth of the Rings of Power. It might get better. I might make videos that go, you know what? I'm glad they listened. I'm glad they started to change the story a bit more. And even while from my perspective, right? And I know there's other people out there who share the same perspective. There's enough that can be done to rectify and remedy the compression. There, this isn't completely ruined yet. Obviously, there's a lot that's not just going well, but I digress. I'm just asking to appease some of the fans who really want to see this done right, like myself. And I know there's plenty of people out there who probably are like, "Well, I don't give a shit what you think, Nick. I don't care if you hate it. Just because you hate it doesn't mean I can't enjoy it." And that's exactly true. Just because I don't like it doesn't mean that you shouldn't like it. I'm just trying to educate you a little bit more because here's the thing, though you might not know about the first age, the years of the trees, the second age, the things that are discussed in the unfinished tales, the fourth age, even you might not know about some of that stuff. That's fine. But imagine if you did. Imagine if this story was told more accurately. How would you feel about it? I think if they actually followed the story and did it differently, we would have a better show. And that's the thing that I don't really get about Hollywood, about these we're going to do it our way. Like if you don't know about some of the comic books or books that are written from other IPs, but people who have, and they say, "Oh my god, it's so good! Like you've got to read it," you know, and all they had to do is follow it. Write a script. Obviously, a script is going to read differently, and sure, there are things that wouldn't, and they don't always translate from page to screen. Like Tom Bombadil is one of the most prime example from The Hobbit, which we never saw. And you know, so the whole thing with The Hobbit and Peter Jackson, it shouldn't have been a trilogy, and that I blame the movie studio for that. I think the movie studio uh should have just backed off a bit. I think we could have gotten a 4-hour movie, or part one, part two, and that would have been fine. That would have been enough. That would have been the way to go. And and they just didn't. You know, the White Orc, he wasn't a he wasn't the main villain the entire time. He was just he was in part of the book, part of the Hobbit. You had the Battle of the Five Armies, you had Smaug, you had the Journey, you had Tom Bombadil, obviously Beorn, but like, again, I think Peter Jackson did a good job. I mean, obviously, it was kind of cool to see in 48 frames per second in the theater. That was trippy though when you had to have those glasses on. Woof. Um, just different rather than like the standard 24 frames per second that we usually watch movies in. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like I don't know how much more I can say at this point. Again, this isn't really a complete bash. I think the orcs looked pretty cool. I think it's hard to mess up how an orc looks or sounds. Um, the warg obviously looked different, and that's kind of expected because of um, this being different. Thousands of years essentially from the orcs that we see in the Lord of the Rings movies. Um, and there's interesting parts about the Southlands because again, it's the timing of things. And um so funny enough, this is a I don't want to quite say this is a spoiler, because I don't know if we'll see this or not, right? I mean, I want to say probably not, but when Isildur travels with his sons and they get to Middle Earth, and he rules in Arnor, and then his two sons rule um uh in Gondor, right? So you we heard Elendil talk about um uh of the star, and um I believe it uh it was um I believe it was trying to think here. I want to say it was I'm having a brain fart. One moment. Yeah. So Gondor was founded by Isildur and Anarion. We haven't seen Anarion in this show yet, but maybe we will. But the cool thing about Gondor was when like Mordor was already there, like to the east, and like Osgiliath was which we've seen and was in ruins, but was once like a great um a great um great city. um and so Minas Arnor, which was Minas Tirith, right, which we've seen, the Great White City. um and but the cool thing was Oh god, I want to say that. So the two sons, they ruled each one, right? So um I'm trying to think here. Um I believe it was an Anarion that was in Minas Tirith, and then um it was uh Isildur that um I want to say it was oh gosh, was it Kidith Ungol? I'm having a brain fart. Let me look this up real quick. Yeah. So Minas Ithil was we've seen it in the Return of the King, which is uh Minas Morgul, where that's where um the Lich King, oh, wow, Lich King, wow. The Witch King of Agmar, um, you know, was. So I think that's kind of cool how things are were connected, right? And um, I don't know if we'll see that though. I think it was what, the sun and the moon, star and the moon, with the two suns. Um, I wonder if we'll see the battle leading up to the Fellowship of the Ring. That would be cool. I think if they were to tie things in that way, from the end of the second age going into the third age, um, with the defeat of Sauron, that would be kind of cool. And hey, look, there are things again that Peter Jackson they didn't accurately portray in the Fellowship of the Ring in the prologue, because the prologue actually states that both Elendil and Gilgalad were dueling Sauron himself, and that they both lost to him. And then, Isildur takes the remains of Narsil and he cuts the One Ring off of Sauron's hands, and he's gone. But like in the movie, we see Isildur throw or um, oh, he's told to throw the ring, cast it into the fire, from Elrond. And he's like, no, Isildur, and just walks out of Mount Doom. That's not in the book. Cool scene though, right? So, it's fine. But again, I think there's small things that you can get away with. It's just the entirety of the show that you can't get away with, at least so far in this first season. I would trust me, I would like for people like myself to like it, but if they're not doing right by us, then maybe it just doesn't matter, which I find insulting. It's basically saying, "Hey, you know all about Tolkien's lore." I've studied in college actually when I was getting my English degree in literature. We read and studied the Silmarillion because it is definitely one of the most finest pieces of literature that I've ever read and that people should read. I understand it might be a little bit dry, but that just kind of tends to be the case. Obviously, it was written a long ass time ago. But have you read Shakespeare? Because, oh God. Um, but I think, again, people shouldn't be faulted for knowing things, for having knowledge of lore. Why is a scholar getting kicked off set when they're there to make sure things are going smoothly with the lore? That the the themes, the meanings, the emotions that J.R.R. Tolkien and his son Christopher Tolkien were trying to convey in the writings. Don't know. But yeah, so this has been a fun stream talking to myself. This is sort of impromptu, so I don't really care. But yeah, I think I'll probably just do single reviews, and I'll try to keep them short. Maybe somewhere between 10, 15 minutes. Um, try. I promise I'll try not to go over 20 minutes at that point. But yeah. Look, I'm. This is definitely a show that has a lot of conversation involved in it, and I'm always intrigued to see and hear what people think of the story. I understand that people might not know as much as I do, and believe me, there are plenty of other people out there who know a lot more than I do, or just have a better and consistent more recollection of things, and that's kind of how it is. But uh, if people have thoughts, they have comments. I'm up for talking. People want to leave comments in the comment section, and I'll chime in after that. Totally down for it. So, but yeah, I think that's I'm going to do it for now, and continue watching Cobra Kai, and looking forward to see how the House of the Dragon series goes as well. So I think so far between the two series, House of the Dragon is the better series. It's a better story, better character development, all that kind of stuff so far too. So, and it's close to the source material. Sorry, I'm out of here. Peace. Just kidding, because another end stream pop up came in. Your stream will stop immediately, and you will no longer be live. Yeah, I get that. Peace.